Sucio Talk in the studio, Jingletown. Don't tell anybody my address. Sitting here with my main man, Tim Ferron. What's up, Tim?
Hey, how's it going?
How you doing, bro?
Pretty good.
So we were talking about this before. I just want to get a title for you. We want to get
Absolutely.
sort of what you're doing now so people know who is Tim Ferron. What are you doing right now?
So I do butchery classes, and then also am the media and brand manager of Bernal Cutlery, and do a lot of sharpening there.
All right.
And merchandising.
Okay. And I met you 10 years ago or
Just
so.
about, yeah.
When you were interning there?
Yeah, I was interning,
Right.
working a couple days a week, helping them, with learning to sharpen. I was still working as a butcher at that time.
Right.
So I was just like, that was one of the things that always bugged me working as a butcher, is just like the whole ideology of sharpening those knives, where it's just like you just rub them on the worst, greasiest stone you could find,
Right.
or like a dinged up like honing rod, and then just throw them in a bucket
Right.
until next day. And so I met Josh pretty early on living here, and kind of just want to learn more about that. So like started interning there, got really into like restoring vintage knives,
Right.
which I still do a lot. I'm a huge fan of vintage.
Okay.
So the knife part is a nice connection of those two things.
Very cool. Very cool. If you had to pick like a favorite knife, what would you say? Meaning I guess style and then brand?
That's a funny question. I get that one asked all the time. People come in, they're like, "What's your favorite knife?"
Yeah.
And I always tell them my favorite knife is the one that works best for
The
the
sharpest.
job.
Yeah.
The one that's the sharpest and the one that works best for it.
Yeah.
But the sharpest isn't always the greatest too. Like a lot of people kind of feel like it needs to be the sharpest, but I felt like depending on the kind of work that you're doing, sometimes having something not necessarily a little dull or a little bit of a tougher edge that's not
Right.
gonna rip through paper, like cut the top off of a tomato, like a TikTok video or something like that. But like I've used some real sharp knives before, like more Japanese style, like ones that were designed for like skipjack tuna and stuff like that. And I used it on a salmon. I always remember like doing that and just like doing like what I always do and just like coming through the back and then just going straight through the whole spine at a crazy angle,
Right.
and just like butchering the whole fish, like not in a good way, and being like, what just happened? I just realized it was like,
You're using the wrong knife.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times that we get attached to tools because of what they look like, their size or whatever. Like I remember my first job, I was using long tongs.
Yeah.
And I loved them because, I could hang them off the apron. They were
Totally.
huge. You know what I mean? I always knew where they were. And then somebody was like, that's unsafe. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I like burned my wrist really bad.
I did that too, where you pick it
Never
up
mind.
and the oil comes all the way
Yeah,
down.
exactly.
Yep.
You're like, I'm
Yeah.
not doing that anymore.
Yeah, sometimes you got to learn the hard way though,
Yeah.
.
Honestly, it was KFC who taught me the way of the tongue.
Yeah.
Because that thing's your like right hand.
Oh, yeah.
You're just like fucking picking chicken and doing whatever.
Yeah. Same with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was Disneyland for me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Where'd you work at Disneyland?
I was one of the line cooks at the Blue Bayou
Oh.
in Disneyland. So whenever you're on Pirates of the Caribbean,
Yeah.
you see that restaurant and you're like, what is that right there? That's the Blue
Okay.
Bayou.
What kind of food you cooking there? Is it all frozen shit?
Oh yeah, it's just like giant.
Is this like drop shit in the fucking fryer?
So, gosh, I can make this whole episode about Disneyland if I wanted to. But so the whole crazy thing about those places, like the one in Florida is even crazier. But I worked at the one in Anaheim, California. But they have giant like routes and systems underneath. Like the one in Florida, for example, has a whole like transient system. For,
Right.
there's like 18-wheelers like doing crazy routes the whole time you're in that park underneath it. Like there's
Underneath
giant
the park,
tunnels and
there's
stuff.
tunnels.
Yeah, So the one in Anaheim isn't as like giant as that, but it does the same thing. There's like these routes. So like Cisco trucks are going through like crazy routes and backing up all the way into these things.
I always thought like you never see any deliveries
Nope.
and shit. They don't have like a
They don't
central
want you
loading
seeing
dock.
anything. Also, you'll never see characters and costumes in the wrong areas because there's all these back things. Like if you're wearing like a Frontierland like cowboy costume,
Right.
and like they catch you walking through Tomorrowland, they're gonna like chew you out.
You're going to get fired.
Yeah, they're gonna bust you up for that one.
Straight up.
Yeah, take you straight to the mouse.
Were you friends with any of the people that did the mascotting?
Yes.
Or what does that entail? Like what kind of people do that? Like, what are they looking for that to do
It
for them?
depends. So there's people that are like mascot, like in costume characters,
Right.
like where you don't see the person.
Yeah.
Like Goofy and
The
Mickey
ones
Mouse
that
and
like hug
stuff.
you and
Yeah,
shit, right.
And like for those costumes, they're either looking for people that are like really tall or really short. So like because all Mickey Mouse and like Minnie, they're all like 5 foot.
like
characters. And then there's like Jafar and Goofy and all those ones where they're like 6 foot. So you get one or the other. And then like I had a couple friends that did those jobs. I had a friend that was like Goofy and stuff. It's like a funny one because you basically, I'm sure it's changed now. This was also like over a decade when I was working there. It was like when I was like getting out of high school. But you work like 30 minutes in the park and then you have a 30-minute break and your whole day is like that, 30 on, 30 off, 30 on, 30 off. When you're
doing mascotting.
Mm-hmm.
So how long is your day? 8 hours?
Like 8
still?
hours, yeah. Uh-huh.
What are you doing in the 30 minutes where you're...
There's like these little break rooms that are all around, and they're always funny because you walk by, you know, you're like smoking a cigarette as a line cook's like fucking tired, and you see all these like people with like their costumes off, like giggling, hanging out in these like weird VIP rooms around the park, and it's like sort of like a weird like system.
Okay, so the mascots is where it's at. If you want to work at Disney,
you know, when it's like a hot ass day, like the kitchen, I'm used to.
Right.
It's hot, but it's still like, you know, fresh air.
And you're just out there melting in your
like
fucking
98
Tweety
degree thing, like hugging kids is Goofy, like just getting battered down. So
I saw a video,
but yeah, and then you know, and then there's like face characters, which are like, you know, Snow White and Peter Pan and stuff like that, and they all just, you know, run around the park and stuff. And then another crazy thing, so between the two parks, if there's like a Peter Pan in like Fantasyland or whatever, you won't find another one out and about anywhere else in the two parks down there. They time them so there'll never be like one Mickey Mouse over here in like Tomorrowland and then one on Main Street like walking around.
There's only one. Damn.
And they're really tight about that.
Who the fuck coordinates this shit?
Dude,
it's like people in clipboards.
Division. So you'll see that every time there's a guardian or like a coordinator with every character walking around them.
Right.
And they just help them go where to go, keep them time management, blah, blah, blah. They're also like kind of the person that like helps break it. So it's just like if someone's doing something they shouldn't, it's not like Peter Pan being like, don't do that, you know, or get over here.
Oh, right. Like Peter Pan breaking up a fight. That's funny. That's awesome. What's the company party like over there at Disney? They do like a fucking Christmas party for you guys?
I was there like one of the last years they did it. I don't think they do it anymore, but it was sick. So they used to have, it was 2 or 3 days towards the like beginning of December. Yeah, it was like right before December or in the middle of December. And they closed the park early, like at like 4 or 5.
Right.
For like 3 days in a row. And then only they call them cast members.
Okay.
You're not an employee of Disneyland. You're a cast member.
You're a cast member. Okay.
And they're not customers. They're guests.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
So they close it early and it's only cast members working. And they're only cast members like enjoying the park. And so basically you'd work 1 or 2 of the days and have one where you can go and you could bring like one or usually I think it was just one person you could bring.
Right.
So it was like cool because it's like basically you're at this place that's like super tight, like has a crazy face, but now it's like just everyone that you know and work with. Or
right.
So it's like that whole like guard is like put down where it's just like, oh, I don't have to like deal with like people coming from all around the world and like have this like face, you know.
What are the because when the rules when you're a cook, like are you expected to be in character and shit too?
No,
like,
not really. Like honestly, like the cooks and all that kind of face, like you're invisible, like walking around the park, you know. And like the cool thing with the system is that like you're able to go anywhere around that park without really being on the floor too much. Like when I worked at that restaurant, I would go the whole back route all the way to the kitchen. So I was never really walking through any part of the park.
Right.
So it makes it pretty easy not to have that kind of thing. And it wasn't like an open kitchen or anything like that.
Right.
So I had like very minimal like experience with the guests, but I was doing a bunch of other jobs there too before that, which are like different. Like there was a bread, I guess I'll like start from the top. So I started there like 17 or 18 years old as a dishwasher.
Okay.
Working at Rancho del Zocalo.
Okay.
Which is the finest in Mexican food Disneyland has to offer.
Heard. Why did you start there?
That's just like where I got hired into.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just like you lived close by, so you're like, hey.
Yeah. So I grew up in Orange County.
Right.
And like went to high school there and was like, you know, looking for jobs. I was cooking and liking to cook at a very young age.
Right.
Like that was like cool thing.
It seems to be a part of the culture over there.
Yeah.
Like growing up, because I had a kid. His name was Jordan. He worked at Charter Oak, and he was a bartender. And he was just like a lot of people moved up from Orange County and were like restaurant people. Yeah. So big culture. Okay. And then we're just looking for jobs, and they're like, hey,
I was looking for jobs, and they had like a whole program. You know, they try to get as many people as they can at a young age there, and like being in it,
brainwash you.
Yeah. And like,
did you love it?
No, I didn't.
When you first got there, you're like, fuck this.
Like I grew up going there and thinking it was like cool and stuff.
Okay, got you. Like, and then when you figured out what it really was,
yeah, like you know, it was like back before it was like absurdly expensive like it is now.
Right,
It was pretty classic for like if you grew up there, you would have like a year membership. Like growing up there too, you get a way better discount on like getting like a single ticket. So,
okay.
Like, most of my friends had year passes, and if they didn't, like, we were able to sign people in and stuff like that. So it was like a classic thing where it's just like, oh, what are we going to do tonight? Like after school, oh, you want to go to Disneyland? Like go on a couple rides, you know, smoke cigarettes in the two places you could smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, right.
Just like be cool kids, you know, at Disneyland. And
for us, it was the mall, bro. So it sounds a lot better.
I know, right? I love the mall too. I still love the mall. But yeah, so I was like, oh, this might be like a cool place, and like it was definitely fun. I'm glad I did it, but then it was just like the more I like was around it, the more I was like, man, this thing is like kind of like a cult, you know, like they're really, really good at like hiring people that are like obsessed with it. And they're like, do you love Disney? What's better than going to Disney than working there, having it be your whole life? And so there's like lifers that like work there
for like 40 fucking years.
Oh yeah. And you know, they probably like do decent at a certain point because like the unions are pretty decent and stuff like that, you know, like they definitely take care of their crew.
Have you ever heard of those Disney towns?
Yes.
What is like?
So there's a couple different types. There's like ones that are basically getting like there's a college program, which is like super dark and fucked up. But the college program is like basically like Disney is like, hey, are you like, you know, in college right now? Like, and like people come from all around. There's like a program they sign up for.
Yeah.
And they're like, you come for us, we'll like get you like hooked into like a close knit like college or a community college, and you'll get credits working with us. Like, and it's like people are like, you know, they live in like Utah and they're like, I want to be in hospitality, so I could take this like hospitality course through Disney, working in the field, and then also take all my same classes. And then they provide housing, and it's like you know, dorm style stuff. And so like it seems awesome, and then you start working there, and then next thing you know, you're like, oh, like they're not like my schedule isn't lining up with like all my other stuff to need to do. And so like basically it's like this form of like breaking them, where eventually you're like more shifts start happening and more shifts, and then
you stop going to school
and you stop going to school, and next thing you know, you're like just working at Disneyland.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't get drawn in, people. Don't get drawn in.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's a trip. But and there's like also the people that like they work full time, and then their days off, they're like, I'm going to Disneyland.
Really?
Yeah. They're like, I'm going to Disneyland today.
Dude. I mean, like, it's fucking took over, bro. I mean, all the movies that I watched when I was young were Aladdin, Pinocchio,
oh man, that's
VHS.
Crazy. Like I like thinking about like, because I was there over 10 years ago, and like that was long before the Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
what was
like
there?
Pixar was like their big thing.
Oh,
still. Like, you know, like
Toy
California
Story,
Adventure, like that kind of whole thing. And
The Incredibles.
Yeah, and like now it's just like Star Wars, Marvel.
It's a lot cooler now. I gotta say, they got like Harry Potter and shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Wait, no, I think that's
is that Universal?
Yeah.
It's all for me. I gotta say, they definitely work together. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean,
come on,
it's like
they got to be under the same
conglomerate.
You know what I mean? Like we're all thinking that it's separate. It's like everything's together these days. You know, I feel like McDonald's and Burger King are working together. Son of a bitch. Yeah. You know, I was thinking about. It's not like that I'm against capitalism all the way, because honestly, if it wasn't for that, like we wouldn't be able to fucking buy this microphone or any of this shit that's in front of me. But I will say that nowadays they just let anybody open a business because they know that at some point they'll fail and then they'll owe the bank money. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But you're sort of gambling on people's like skill level. And I feel like more often than not, people don't know how to run a business, but then the government makes it super easy. Like, it's really easy to get an LLC and start your business, right? Even if you don't know shit.
It's just like a lot of like, it's like almost you could like view it as like the government is running like one of the biggest like MML schemes of all time.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is like getting people to be like, oh, it's so easy.
Yeah, it's so easy to open a business. Yeah.
And like, we're going to help you get started. And you're like, awesome. Okay, I started. What do I do now? And they're like, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Like,
you start a business, bro.
You're a small business.
You're a business owner. Yeah.
And it's just like, and they're like, well, but anyway, rent's due.
Yeah, yeah, so exactly. Like, yeah.
So yeah, it's really messed up.
Fuck you, pay me.
Yeah.
You know, there's also like, I feel like we as a society don't try to cap growth. And I'm not saying that we should hold people back, but I think that there's some, these big corporations that are just growing larger and larger and larger. And it's like, at some point, just stop them, bro.
Yeah.
Like they don't need to be the highest grossing business in the world.
Right.
And like, that's where the goal always is. More money, more money, more money. And it's like, come on. I've seen that other side. I've cooked for some millionaires and shit, just personal chefing. And when you need a team of nannies to raise your children, I just don't, that level of society is not for me.
Raising employees.
Exactly. Yeah. Employees. And something that I noticed with the like nanny situation, be like, oh, like these kids have an employee with them.
Yeah.
Like their whole lives, so that they could just boss around and bitch to, and then like these people have to take it. You know what I mean? And it's like a crazy ass dynamic.
Pretty wild.
That I'm like, when I think about my life and I'm like, man, I want to be successful, but I'm not, like, that's not success to me.
There's a certain point where it's just like, you can't be happy. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And but can't fix all the world's problems. How long did you work at Disney?
About 4 years, I think.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah. Until I was like, I think 21, but yeah. So I was a dishwasher there at this Mexican restaurant.
Okay.
But the whole time I was like, I want to get in the kitchen. Like, I love this stuff. And they're like, yeah, maybe. And like the management system there is like really weird too. Like, cause it's just like all these different kind of like pods and things. And a lot of people are like getting into these jobs to train to do them at a bigger level, Right. So like a lot of those positions are just people are like just rise and grind. They're like, I'm doing this until I could get out of here and do the next better thing, So like I was a dishwasher there for like over like a year or something like that. And then they're like, oh, you want to be lead dishwasher, blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, man, I want to cook. Like, and like, and then at the same time, there's like managers and like new managers, assistant managers. And like, there was like this one manager that came in, like, I don't know what it was, but just like instantly he's like, I don't like this kid. Like, and so like, he would always just like be watching me with a hawk eye, and it was one of those things too where I'd just be like smile, like, yeah, I probably made it worse just by like kind of being like, dude, I see right through this.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Like,
you're an asshole. And
I'm like, yeah. I'd be like overtly nice asshole to him.
Right.
Like ask him how his day is and take time out of his day. Like, and this like, he'd be like staring at me and I just like act like I'm not, watching him and just stare right at him and smile. And, and I remember one time, like, I like dropped like 2 tongs off like one of the hooks.
Yeah.
And I picked them up and like brought him around to a dish pit and like threw him into one of the bins to be washed. And like, I'm doing some other stuff. And he's like, where'd you put those tongs? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, did you hang them back up? And I was like, absolutely not. Like, that's crazy. Like, they're on this like dirty ass floor. And then he's like, okay. He's like, thank you. I was like, no problem. And then like I go back to the pit and then like I catch him from the corner of my eye, like picking up the thing to make sure they're in there. And I was just like, man, this guy, like,
he's out to get you, bro.
I can't do this. So at that point I was like, maybe this is not the place I want to cook. I want to figure that out. So the cool thing about Disney is that you're able to like kind of move around. Like you could like apply for it. It's such a massive place. You could be like, look, I kind of want to get into this instead. And if they have a position, they're like, absolutely, we'll move you over there because it's way easier than hiring a brand new person, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it promotes like growth from within, blah, blah, blah. It's like a lot of those like kind of like Apple does that stuff all the time too. Like they have these sort of like, it lead things where you could like try a different exploration of work. And I got a job at the Bodine Bakery there in California Adventure. And so California Adventure has this like fake wharf. There's like a Mission tortilla factory and a Bodine bakery and like something else. And it like makes it feel like you're like right on the like docks of San Francisco.
Right.
And it's like, I forget, it's like, so basically if you haven't been on that tour, you like all go into like a room and then this like video starts and it's like Rosie O'Donnell and like Colin from Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right.
And they're like, welcome to, you know, California Venture, like the history of bread, blah, 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 you know, about Mother and these prospectors would carry it on, you know, and then like the doors open and it's just like this glass room with like 4 bakers just doing like, you know, 1 ton like batches of sourdough.
Oh.
And there I was, like one of those guys doing that. So it was like cool because I was just like doing these like crazy giant batches. Like, so they make all that bread. Like we'd make like 4,000 bread bowls a day. And then they would get shipped all around the park for any place that has like a soup and bowl. Right. You know, special on their menu. And so that's the crazy thing about Disneyland is that they have a lot of these like a lot of their food is actually in-house in a way. Like they have giant industrial kitchens all around the park that do stuff. And then they like seal it up and then ship it to all the different places. And then, so I do that tour and that one was funny because you're just like waving at guests and just like, you know, rolling out baguettes and loaves and stuff like that. And, it was just like pretty fun. Just like, you know, doing that much, like a proof box, like the size of like a small home. Yeah. You're just like putting them all in there, like all on giant, like, you know, push racks. And then like, you know, I'd spend like 2 hours just like scoring like, you know, 400 bread loaves, like with the same pattern. And so it's like, it was fun, like, you know, doing the same thing over and over again and getting good out of it. And then from there, I was doing that for a while. And then like, they were like, hey, we have an opening at like the fine dining of Disneyland. Ooh. And I was like, ooh. And it was the Blue Bayou. Okay. And so Blue Bayou is like one of their nicer restaurants. There's another one above it called Club 33, which is like the secret restaurant of Disneyland that like you can't get a reservation. You have to have a membership to it. And then when you have that membership, you could then get a reservation. And I think like memberships yearly are like $20,000.
20 grand?
Yeah. So it's mostly like, you know, corporations and bigger accounts that have it to like,
what the fuck?
Suck it out. And
I'm going to do it for 1 year.
Try it out.
Is it expensive too? Like when you walk in there,
you don't get like it all free because you pay that.
Right.
It just gets you in the door.
That's like a fucking one of those resort memberships up in Napa.
Exactly.
That's all good.
But no, it's cool. So like then I was working at this place and it's like a tiny little kitchen, lots of us on the line, and then an elevator takes you down to this massive industrial kitchen that's like 2 levels. And what people don't realize is Pirates of the Caribbean, the ride, you're basically just going in a giant circle around the biggest industrial kitchen I've ever been in. Wow. It's massive. Okay. Like, and so like, you know, there's like deep blast chillers for like cooling stuff. There's like those, like, they kind of look like a plancha, but the sides go up like 2 feet. And it's like basically a giant like griddle / like, you know, you can make like a batch of like 1,000 pounds of chili in it or something like that, and you're just like stirring it and stuff like that. We had like the giant mixing bowls with that had the wheel racks on them, so you could push them around. They're like this big, you know, the stainless steel ones. And like that was like I'd start like doing prep there, and you know, just be like cases and cases of like tenderloin, just like up to my elbows with just like, you know, like garlic and shallots and olive oil, just like mixing them, putting them in sheet trays for like the whoever's working like the grill that day. Yeah. And then just like prepping lobster tails, like hundreds of lobster tails. And like
so many fucking lobster tails, dude.
And like that was the whole thing. Like there was like surf and turf, like kind of like nice French, you know, but it was like the place where like you get like the 3 perfect like prongs of like asparagus like laying on the mashed potatoes. And like it was like I don't know, it was like
the lathed baby carrots.
Yeah. Okay. It was like someone saw like Gary Danko's in like the like early 90s and was like, this is it, this is peak food right here. And we're never changing this.
Yo,
like,
that's so funny.
And so
same menu to this day, you think?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, can't change perfection, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Who can do it?
So So I was doing that for about a year and a half, I think. And then I was like, man, this is not it. You know, like I'm not cooking or making food. I'm just like fabricating. Like it just didn't even feel like food anymore.
Right.
It could have just been any like labor, you know, like I was just changing it for one form and preparing it for another thing, and then going upstairs, cooking it and plating it.
Right.
And I was like, I don't like this anymore. And then, you know, at the time they're like, oh, do you want to, you know, be a lead here? Do you want to start doing this stuff? And like, at first, like, you know, cause I was like 20 years old, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is like, that's where it's at, like growing up in these kind of things. And then I realized like every time you get like a promotion that you're just like farther away from the food.
Right.
And that was like the only thing that I was interested in,
you cared about.
And then like, you know, I'd like go downstairs and do like cart runs to get supplies, which is like cool because it was almost like supermarket sweep where like I get a prep list and then I'm just like running around this industrial kitchen, just like going to fridges, like, and
love supermarket sweep.
Oh yeah, so fun.
Great game.
And it was like I was like, okay, gotta go do this and this and this, and like they're all in their own things, and just like I would just make it fun by seeing how fast I could do a run and this and that. And but then, you know, then I see like the chef room, and like there's like the chef room. It always reminds me of like movies with like high security prisons,
right,
where there's like, you know, it has this like kind of open floor, and then there's this metal and glass room with like a buzzer, and then it's just like they're all in there, you know. And but it was just like, I don't know, it just felt kind of sad. Like they're just in this box and they're just like doing all the ordering, and it's like, yeah, you got like, you know, a shirt with your name embroidered on it, but like,
and the chef,
when's the last time you cooked, you know? And I was like, that's not it. Like, I don't want to do that. And so I was like basically lamenting everything I'm saying now to I was hanging out at the house one day at my parents' house, and I was like saying all this, and like our neighbors were over and stuff, and our neighbor, her sister is Angela of Avedanos in Bernal Heights. It's the butcher shop.
Wow.
And we were like, and I've known her since like I was younger in high school, because she would come over all the time. That's like when we moved to the house. And she's like, oh yeah. And she's like super easygoing, like casual. And it was like, oh yeah, well, if you ever want to like, you know, move to San Francisco and like work in my butcher shop, make sandwiches, learn a little bit about stuff, I was like, let me know. I'm happy. Like, he's like, we're looking for something. It was like super easygoing. And then like, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I ran into her again. And she's like, yeah, just let me know. And I was like, yeah, you know what?
Let's do it.
Let's do that. Yeah. And a month later, I was up here.
Was quitting Disney, do they make it difficult? Is it like a membership where they're like...
No. I was just like, hey, I'm quitting. And the best part about that is literally that week, like the week before, that manager just started at the Blue Bayou as a manager.
Oh, right.
I was like...
Perfect timing. I'm out,
like,
bitch.
What, this guy, like... And so I was like, hey, man, I'm quitting. And then I was like, I'll see you later. You know, like, I'm out of here. And it was like, you could tell he was bummed, not because he's like, oh man, like I'm gonna have to rehire. This guy was good. He was like, oh man, I was like finally gonna like catch him. Like, I was like
get to yell
I was
at him.
his white whale for some reason. And like, he's like, I want to bring this guy down.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'll never know what it was.
Yeah.
But it always cracks me up. But yeah, so then a month later, I am living in the closet of her house.
Okay.
For $300 a month.
For that.
And working as a butcher, or, you know, training to work at a butcher.
Right.
And so, you know, it's just like making paninis, doing like working the counter, you know, so like people like, can I get that? And, you know, doing this. It was fun because like I already had a little cooking experience, especially with meat. I was doing a lot of grilling at my jobs and stuff. So I was just like,
so you have more experience than your age denoted, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
So, and then like, so, because that's the whole thing, you know, you work at a counter and people are like, how do I cook this? And, you know, making it easy and accessible for people and giving recommendations, hearing how people cooked it. It's really fun, you know? And then making sandwiches. And then from there, started slowly getting into butchering more and more and more. But I didn't really have much, like, I had like a chef knife that I used. That's kind of all I had. But so like on my second day working there, the manager at the time, Chris, was like, all right, dude, let's get you some knives. And so we were, this is on Cortlandt Street. This is where Avedon was still at. At the time, Bernal Cutlery was just a small little stall at the spot called 331 Cortlandt.
Right.
And so
Bernal Cutlery was around.
It was.
What year is this? This
is like 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heard that.
Bernal Cutlery's been around since like 2005.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It was like,
what's the owner's name?
Josh. So Josh and Kelly. Yeah.
Josh and Kelly.
Kelly Kozak.
Okay.
Yeah. So they, she was doing like a lot of photography for like catalog stuff.
Right.
During that time. And Josh was doing, he was like working with like metal fabrication and like sculpture stuff.
Yeah.
And, like manufacturing kind of stuff. And he just lost his job, and she was still, working as like a photographer. And so they just had a kid. And so he's like, well, I'm just going to like, take care of the kid for now and stuff like that. And so he started just like going around the neighborhood, like door to door, like, knife sharpening, so like he would like have his, kid on his back in a little backpack, go door to door, pick up a bunch of knives. Yep. You pick up a bunch of knives and then go home, have the kids sitting next to him, and then just sharpen them all, wrap them up, and then just bring them back to, next day or week or whatever. Right. And then they started like, they had like their old living room used to have like a little knife case in it. And so they had like a little bit of stuff they were like selling in their early day. Mm. And then after being like kind of like a neighborhood kind of thing for a while, they got that spot at 331 Cortlandt.
Okay.
And at the time that was like it's like a small business incubator. So it's like a big kind of space that has like 3 or 4 stalls in it. Right. And so like one of them was Bernal Cutlery. There's like a Pierogi spot. There was, the very, very early stages of Ichi Sushi. Mm-hmm. So there's like a 4 or 5 top bar, like sushi bar in there, which is really cool. And then there was like, there was Polly's Pickling, which is like really amazing, like Jewish jellery.
Okay.
So like pickles, making like lox, chicken liver, like all that amazing stuff. Dope. And so there was like those stalls in there. And then he was like the only one that wasn't food. It was just like a small little knife case, and then like a old trophy case that had like magnets in it too.
Okay.
And so within 2 days of living in San Francisco, they're like, we got to come over here. So we walk like, 2 minutes down the street to this place, and I meet Josh for the first time. And I'm like, this is cool. Like, just like this huge case right here. It's like this, he's like working on some knives in front of him. And then I bought like this vintage, like 10-inch Dexter scimitar. So it's the one that has that kind of curve.
Yeah, like, baby. Yeah. Uh-huh. Dexter's a fucking good knife killer. Company, man.
Yeah. It was like from the 1950s.
Yeah.
And it was carbon steel. And then I got like one of those like Haneski Maru kind of like really pointy knives. They're great for like they're designed for like hang breaking. So the whole thing is, instead of like holding it like this, like with the tip up or like this, you would kind of hold it like this. Yeah. And then so you have like your hook in one hand, and then you're just like peeling,
Yeah.
And that's
like in the very beginning of the process.
Yes.
No?
Yeah. Like typically hang breaking. Taking so you have it like you'll have like the 4/4 like still hanging by like, it's like a little ankle.
Yeah.
And then the nice thing about doing that is you're just cutting into primals, and then you have gravity as your best friend.
Yeah, gravity is the best friend.
It is the best.
Even for pasta, for fucking butchery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it made it really easy. But so I had that, and then I got like a classic 10-inch Case Sabatier stainless steel chef knife.
Chef went all out.
Yeah. I got those 3 ones. I was like, I'm gonna do it. And it was a killer price. I don't remember exactly how much, but like for getting 3 knives that are like, nice. It was like way cheaper than if I went to like Williams Sonoma or something, And I also feel like at that time, like vintage knives weren't like the same thing that they are now, where people were like looking for certain brands and like, I mean, that was always there, but they weren't like, oh, that one's worth this much because of this reason and stuff. And it was hard to explain why something old and used is more valuable to some people, and that'll always be like a conversation, but it's nice to see nowadays that like people are like kind of respecting the history and excited about those kinds of things, and also realize that like, you know, there is a little bit of truth to like the old, like, you know, sentiment of like, you know, they don't make things like they used to. And so I had those 3 knives and I just started getting to work, and like, you know, it was really my first like sort of like dive into like quality knives and like how much better they make your job and how easier it is. And, you know, it's just like the same thing with any industry. It's just like having the right tools is like the make or break.
Did you get stones as well?
I did not get stones.
Okay.
No,
So what happened the first time where you're like, this shit's getting dull?
I took them
just
over there.
back? Okay.
Brought them on over to Josh. Yeah. And then, like I had like a honing rod and stuff like that. That was like for kind of touching them up on the go and stuff.
Right.
And so that would help a little bit, but then
the little Mac one with the ceramic,
the ceramic. There's the black
that's
one. That's
2012 that everyone was using.
Yeah, it's like the whole joke. You'd never see like a whole one.
Yeah,
like
never. So they're always broken.
Yeah. It looks like a little dagger, like all broken. But yeah, so those were just like, you know, they're killer. It's fun. And then just like through working there for a while, I just like, you know, I went from just doing chickens and, you know, a lot of the fish to the kind of the bigger things. Like we'd get lamb in all the time, half pigs, and then just like breaking that stuff down. And like, I'm always been like kind of a crafty, like DIY kind of person. I like taking things apart and building them back together. And so like, it was just like a really fun kind of like puzzle almost, like doing that kind of stuff. And then through that, I just got really good at it. And, just, you know, was kind of rise to the ranks of being a butcher there, doing a little bit of beef work too. And beef's kind of like, we would joke is like the Broadway of like the butchery stuff, you know, because it's like one of the things like.
That's true. Anybody could break down a pig.
It's the money meat. Yeah. And like, and it's like, it's hard to get trained on it because it's expensive. Yeah. And it's like, you don't want to make mistakes because it's like, you're just throwing away money.
Yeah.
You know?
If you cut into anything the wrong way, you're fucked.
And you know, people are like tight-lipped about certain things, and that's certainly one, because it's like, you know, everyone's competition at a certain point.
Yeah.
When you all know how to do the same thing. But it.
How long you stay at the butcher shop?
I was there for I think like probably 2 or 3 years. So what started happening is like I was working there for like 5 days a week. And then I was also like DJing twice a week at like random bars, like doing vinyl sets. It was like mostly El Rio. So like every Monday night, like back when they used to have this, like it was madness. But it was like $2 well shots and $1 Tecates.
Oh God!
And so it was
People
like, yeah,
hammered.
it's like my Woodstock '99 story. You know, like
what kind of music were you DJing?
Mostly like indie punk, like whatever I was buying and liking at the time. You know,
what's a good record store? I mean, obviously, other than the greats, Amoeba and all that.
I'm trying to think. You know, that's part of the tricky part. Is like I haven't bought records in so long.
Right.
It's like I still have a big collection. My favorite at the time was Rasputin, because I was buying a lot of 45s from them. And I was doing lots of like Motown and disco and dance in the back room at El Rio. And so it was like perfect because like, you know, it ain't cheap buying records, and even, you know, the cheap ones. And so it was only like 40 cents to 80 cents for like a 45. So it was like one song. And I was like, that's a great deal. Like, and so I was just like buying a bunch of like classic, like Motown and old soul and disco and just like, you know, a bunch of stuff. So like that was one of the big things I do. That was at Rasputin back when it was in Union Square next to Blondie's Pizza, which I don't even think is there
in
either.
Union Square.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that was like right where the cable car starts.
Yeah.
Like that round that I don't know what it is now, but it used to be like a 4-story record store.
Really?
Yeah. And had like a really dingy like service elevator that always had an employee in there, press the buttons for you.
Yeah.
And just like kind of make sure you're not like stealing, basically.
Yeah.
It's like everyone, that's like the changing room, you know? Like,
okay.
So, and it was cool because I would just like see the same people every day going there in the elevators and like, you know, just like shoot the shit with them, and they'd be like, oh, getting more, blah, blah, blah. It's just like the funniest little interaction.
Dude, the record
with, like,
store
people.
is the shit.
Oh, yeah.
Like
you know,
I'm sad that we don't have those anymore. Well, I mean, we have them, but it's not the same.
Well, the whole industry's changed,
Yeah.
And but that's what happens with time, is change.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was doing a lot of that, and then so I was like working the butcher shop, I was DJing, and then at that time, Kelly, the co-owner with Josh of Bernal Cutlery, was like staging at Avadano's because she's like good friends with Angela too.
Okay.
And so she was like curious about like that whole line of work, and like because she does a lot of like historical and like food science studies, and so it was like loves to like kind of nerd out about that stuff and learn more about it for her like kind of applications. And she was like, oh yeah, we're like thinking about moving to this new spot, like, you know, might need some people, like kind of chatting me up about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't know, like I'm doing all these things. And it was the new spot that they were at before we're at now, which is 593 Guerrero. That was the one that we always kind of called the one shop. It was like the little tiny one diagonal from Tartine Bakery.
Right.
Walk by it a million times, never know it's there.
That's where I bought a couple things.
And yeah, I remember she always like tells me like there's one day where like, so what we do is we would sell dog food at Avadano's, and it would just be like a lot of our trim,
right?
Like, and then vegetables, like any stuff that's like about to go or needed to be.
What would you do with it?
So we would just save all the trim at the end of the day in little containers and grind it and cryovac it and like freeze it. And because the whole thing is like when you work at a butcher shop, anything that you are putting into your compost is money that you're literally throwing away. You know, you could like weigh out your compost every day and be like, this per pound is how much money I'm throwing away. And so it's all about minimizing that, you know? And so one of the ways to do that is to make things that are for dogs that like, you know, people wouldn't necessarily eat.
Yeah.
Like we used to get all the
like cartilage and shit.
Yeah. Like, or we get pig skin and just like tie it in little knots, take all the fat off of it and dry it off and dry it out in the walk-in, and they'd be like dog chews, you know?
Oh, great.
Or just like get beef liver, and like you'd only sell so much beef liver. I wish more people bought it, but like it's the truth of the matter, you know?
Right.
And
you don't have the liver king.
Yeah. Oh my God. Maybe for selling maple syrup, it'd be a different story. But you know, you could cube that up into little tiny pieces, put it in a dehydrator, and it makes these like, they're like dog crack. They go crazy for it. And it's just dried up liver straight. And these are like great cows, like, you know, completely grass fed or like a small grain finish, depending on which
you know what farm they were coming from?
It's coming from like Magruder Ranch and then 5 Dot.
5 Dot.
Yeah, 5 Dot. Ranch. Yeah. And doing great stuff. And then so we would have all this trim, and then there would be like a time where we had enough or we needed to make more of the food, right? And so you would get all this trim and just like throw it all into this giant like Lexan, like giant, like, you know, those it's like not Cambro, but it's like the ones that are like kind of that cloudy white, like you know, just like a tray or bucket basically. And you throw it all in there. You just like grind a bunch of like carrots and like fresh vegetables, kind of like whatever you had in the walk-in that was, you know, still good and of course safe for dogs,
right?
And then a bunch of eggs, like cracked whole egg shell and all. And then yogurt, and then just mix this all together into this kind of like sloppy, like raw dog food mix.
Yogurt.
Yeah. Gives a nice consistency. It's good for them.
Yeah.
And so I was like the dog food guy there too. And so like, I remember Kelly was like just in awe because like I'm there like elbows deep in this stuff, just like mixing it, it, you know, mixing it around, making sure the consistency's on. And she's like, this guy needs to help us. This guy should work with us. And like, I just always like
if he cares about dog food.
Yeah. And like, and then, you know, you'd pound it out in bags, wrap it up, put in butcher paper, put a sticker on it and freeze it. And there's people that are like, my dog will not eat anything else. And it was cool. It was like, I was like, you know, if I had a dog, I'd probably like start making stuff like this, but it was, and like, you know, people care about dogs a lot. So you're able to at least make some of your money back off of that stuff that was otherwise getting, you know, tossed. Yeah.
Fortunately and unfortunately.
Yes.
It's like people would rather feed their dog than feed a human being.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't understand that, but whatever.
It's a wild thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then through that, she's like, you know, she's like, oh, you should like, you know, talk to Josh about like maybe staging or something like that. And I was like already interested in it because at that point I was like, trying to sharpen a little bit, and you know,
and you're probably not over the butcher
I wasn't
shop.
over.
Like, I did it all.
Yeah, you know, I was, and I still loved it, and I was like, I don't know, this place is like a lot to me, and I was like, maybe I can work a day or two or something like that, you know. And so I started like interning for a while,
right? And
like in those things, I was just basically doing little stuff for them, and then getting trained to sharpen like a lot.
Okay,
like, you know, so. It was like a really cool role where I was just like, you know, sharpening little orders, working on stuff. At that point, I was like really kind of getting them to focus on like restoration. I was like, if you guys want to start like cleanups and stuff, I love doing that. Like, I'll get dirty and stuff like that. So it was just like me with like really old knives, rust eraser, sandpaper, you know, just like basically refinishing a whole knife and making it look good, sharpening it up and stuff. And it was like super fun. It's like, I've always been one of those people. It's like really rewarding, like having something in your hand that's like rusty. It's got gunk on it. The handle doesn't feel nice. And then just bringing it through the whole cycles, and then just, you know, having this beautiful product in front of you. Same with like cooking, you know,
right.
You have all these raw ingredients, and then you have this beautiful dish in front of you. And then it being like a tool on top of it is cool. Just like, cause now it's like, it's ready for its purpose to go out in the world and help someone do their job better.
Got it. Where did Josh learn how to sharpen?
He was doing like a lot of like stone sculpturing and like carving and stuff like that too. Okay. So I think through that is where he really got a lot of his knack for it. Wood chisels and, you know, kind of more carving style tools, and then just like cooking and stuff like that. He's always had like a knack for like pocket knives. I feel like anyone kind of in the whole knife world will always have a story about like, you know, finding their first pocket knife.
Right.
And, you know, how it just for some reason connected to them. And,
got you.
And so I think just through that, it like really kind of exploded. And then like him like early on kind of learning about Japanese knives when they're still like this mythical thing to a lot of people, or like not really like accessible, or the ones that did get over here were like pretty like not necessarily fake, but they were just like, you know, like Shuns and Globals and stuff where it's just like more, it's just, you know, it's a Wusthofer Henkel with a new bell on it. But yeah, so just like kind of through that whole aspect of everything. And then I would just be sharpening, and then it turned in from like working there one day to like actually like, you know, working for them, working there 2 days. And I was working like 7 days a week for like a year and a half. And I was like, this is sick. Like, I, you know, work hard, play hard, like, you know, and
drinking every night.
And then I was like, God, this sucks. Like, I'm so tired. You know? And then so I just was like, you know, then I went back to Avedon. I was just like, hey, I'm going to take down like a day or two. And, you know, have like a 5-day, like, you know, 3 here, 2 there kind of thing. And then that kind of like slowly trickled from like 2-3 to 3-2. And then eventually I was like dreading it, but I was like, Angela, like, I think I'm going to work here. Like, I don't think I want to work here anymore. And and I was like,
did you break her heart, dude?
No, she's like, oh yeah, it's all good. And that's like the whole thing is like, she knows, she's like all about like growth and stuff. And like, she was almost like, yeah, good. I don't want you to be here forever. Yeah. You know, like
that's a great leader.
This is not your end. Like, I want you to continue to grow. You just moved here. I'm just giving you off a jumping point. And like, she still is like one of my best friends. She was one of my groomsmen in my wedding. She almost is like a godmother to me.
That's so dope.
And I think it's really important to have like really awesome people like that, you know, like
100.
And then just like, but it was just amazing because I just remember being like so stressed. I like barely slept that night, like having to like be like, I'm not going to work here anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and like, that's how, you know, it's like, I really cared about that job. You know, it's like not often that people are like, oh dude, like I'm dreading quitting this place. But, it was, you know, it happened and she still like, we actually have like a little like selection of like Bernal Cutlery things that we sell there. So like people in that neighborhood could get stuff because, you know, I love Bernal, but some people like, it's like the suburbs of San Francisco. It's like almost like its own little like Pleasantville episode.
Yeah,
like,
I get you.
Like people like start walking down Cortland and there's like a barrier in their way and they're like, I can't get out of here, you know? And so there's like cool things about that, but then also it's like, you know, there's such a massive, beautiful city and Bay Area that we live in, and it's such a small little thing.
Do you think you would open any more storefronts, like one in Oakland or something?
I think we would like love to do that. It's just like, building the team to do something like that is definitely a big part of it. I'm like one of the only people that lives in the city that works there. So I definitely know that everyone else on the team would be ecstatic about like a
spot in
East Bay spot.
Yeah.
It's just about finding the right one. And making it work. One of the trickiest things that happened is we were at, 593 for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then we had the opportunity to move to 766 where we currently are. And it was formerly the Paxton Gate Curiosity spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then before that, I think it was like a new college. It was like sort of like a it's like kind of like an arts college learning center kind of thing.
Okay.
I think. And then before that, I guess it was like a venue. It was like a cool, like kind of cafe bar or something like that would have shows and this and that. So a lot of really cool history in that space. But when it was originally made, it was a mortuary. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Incline Gallery, that like cool, like sort of thing. They have a little gallery and art shows. You walk up these 2 lifts. That was designed for moving coffins up and down.
Really?
Yeah, because there's not like a service elevator or anything like that. And so so it's wide for turns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's also why it's always so cold in there.
The dead was big business, huh?
Oh yeah.
Now we just burn those motherfuckers.
So it's a funny space for that reason, but it's cool. And it was nice to like have the opportunity to really like spread out, because the other spot was so small, and like everyone that's like been to the old spot, you go in there, you're getting helped, and then like 2 more people walked in and you're all like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know what that's about.
And the new spot was like this really scary thing, but like it's really been able to really grow and strive, which is really cool. Basically, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there.
No worries. When you first started working there, how many people did they have, and how many people do they have now?
So
comparatively,
when I was working there, I was the fifth person.
Okay.
Yeah. And now it's probably around 18 or 20 people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got you. And are most of those people sharpeners?
No. We only have like a lot of the older employees. So it's like me, Josh, and Elisa. Elisa's been there about the same amount, a little bit more than me. Are like, do sharpening shifts and stuff. And then we have a team of about 4 or 5 dedicated sharpeners that mostly focus on that. But anyone that's been with us for a while is like pretty good at doing a lot of different things. So like if people need to get help on the floor or something like that, like they're well versed in that as well. But for the most part, there's like most people help on the floor, or like we have a whole we have a huge online website as well.
Do you do more sales online than you do in store?
I would say not 50-50, but
that's nice to hear, though. It's nice to hear that you have people still coming in.
I think the pandemic really like kind of changed up a lot of that stuff. But
who's your main clientele? Cooks?
So it was for the longest time, especially at the old spot until the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then it just dropped.
Yeah.
It was scary, because like
I call it spoon culture.
Spoon culture.
Because like, when the Coon spoons came out and all those, like we were all about it. We were always in knife shops, the antique shops looking for spoons. And then knives took over, and it was like, oh my God. Yeah. And then now it's like, you don't really see anybody in kitchens talking about knives like they used to.
Yeah. I think it was like, one good thing about the pandemic is like, I mean, I'm also outside looking in because I haven't been in kitchens in a long time, but I feel like it kind of reset a lot of issues that kitchens were having, and like back when it was like that, I was like, man, this job sucks and it's brutal, but every now and then I get to go to a store and buy this trinket that keeps me going.
Exactly.
So it's like a spoon or a knife or something like that.
For sure.
And I think it's also like, it's like anything where it's just like, like you got like construction workers or anything like that, where like when they get into it, they buy all the nicest stuff, and then you see the seasoned guys have been doing it for like 30 years, and they're like, I buy the cheapest, dumbest one, and I use it till it breaks, and I buy a new one.
Exactly, yeah.
Like neither of them are wrong. Yeah. It's just like,
don't get attached to it, bro.
Exactly. They've been around. That's the
way I do my knives, man. I'm not about like, have you, there's Japanese knife exchanges online.
Yeah.
Where you can like trade your old ones in and
Yeah. There's a lot of great communities on like some of the forums and stuff that do it. We do trade-ins too, which are kind of cool.
Okay.
Based on like condition. I mean, there's certainly like yeses and nos of conditions and stuff like that. But it's a cool way to give like cooks maybe, you know, because a lot of times like if you're working in a professional kitchen, you have a lot of knives dedicated to certain jobs. So if you have a career change or you're doing different stations or something like that, you're like, man, I have all this stuff in my roll that I don't use. We'll buy it back and like fix it up and sell it as trade-ins for people and give you store credit. Which is, you know, a nice way to sort of like clear up your kit again, maybe get something nicer. And we try to be as fair as possible, like based off the condition of it, you know, and it also gives people a great opportunity that are like getting into it or something that want something that's previously owned and ready for a new life at a good price, you know?
Yeah. Did you guys, you know, we know that there's other restaurants around, but like, who is your peer? Like Town Cutler? Are you guys going to knife shows together, or is it much more cutthroat than that? Like, you're my competition.
I don't even think it would be like a competition either. Right. I think that we are both doing similar things, but in the grand scheme of things, it was very different. They focus more on their own manufacturing of stuff.
Oh, okay. Got you.
And it was like kind of a different area and clientele, I felt like, for the most part. There's not necessarily any like beefs or anything like that. I don't even think they're in the city anymore. I think they just moved to Reno for factory. Yeah,
they did. Okay.
So I just think at the bottom line of it is like, I don't like to view anyone as competition because, you know, it's the same reason like one nice restaurant doesn't necessarily view another nice restaurant as competition,
right?
Unless the chefs have beef or something like that,
right?
But because we're all in it, same, you know,
we're all in it together, bro.
We're providing a service too, like, you know, and I think what makes Bernal Cutlery special is like the history that goes along with stuff and vintage knives and like the restoration and like that kind of ideology, and then like coming at it from more of like a you know, knives are a tool. Like, you know, there's some that are really beautiful and, you know, you can hang it on a wall if you want, but like even Japan, you know, you have these like amazing knife makers that have been making knives for 50, 70 years, and their knives come to the States and some of them sell for $2,000 to $5,000, and you have people that, you know, put it on a wall or keep it in a case or put it in a safe, never to use, and just accrue value or something like that.
Do they accrue value?
Some of them do, certainly. Yeah.
What makes them accrue value?
Just the, you know, the,
like if the knife maker's consistent and keeps making knives.
Unfortunately, when they pass away, just like a lot of other things, is a big thing. When it's unavailable to other people, all the same things that make other things collectible, you know,
scarcity.
Yeah. But like if you bought this knife and then just put it in a safe and never used it, it would like break that smith's heart. Like they would not want you to tell them that.
No, yeah,
because they're like, I made you a really beautiful tool that's
use it
to be used.
Well, I tell you what, man, I would buy a new knife and it would stay in my kit for a year because I'd be afraid to use it because I wouldn't want to ruin it. And then it comes that time when you're like, you can't take it with you, Dave. Right. So it's like, just fucking use it, bro.
And I think that's one of the big things that happens with like a lot of cooks that are afraid to sharpen too, is that they're like, I'm going to scratch it. I'm going to mess it up. But here's the thing about sharpening. Sharpening is scratching it with focus. You know? You're just putting all the scratches in this same precise area. And the only way to do that is to practice. And the good thing is, like, you know, if you get scratches on your knives or something like that, you could always fix it. You go through the whole steps. You could polish it out. You could do so many things to fix it. But if you don't like handle that side of it, it's never going to, you know, get easier.
Yeah.
You jump into it, you know? So I'm like all about just like helping, like, you know, Spencer was on this a couple weeks ago or something like that. So Spencer lives in we're next door neighbors. We live in the same unit together. And I have another great bud of mine, Dan, that lives upstairs. Also, he used to work at the Progress with Spencer.
Okay.
Now he does plants and stuff like that.
Dope.
But we all hang out, have like awesome like backyard barbecues and stuff like that. And like always do like little sharpening things together, or like we do classes at Bernal Cutlery. Sometimes we'll do, like off sites where we go to restaurants and bring stuff and like help, that's where we met.
Yeah. It's a great way to do that and sell it. How do you structure that, dude? Does the restaurant pay for your time to come up and teach the class, or are you guys banking that you're going to sell some knives up there?
It's like case by case, depending on like where we're going and how big of a team is going out there.
Got you. Because if it was Metalwood, I'm sure it was like,
so it was like, it just, it depends. And like a lot of the chefs, like, like are like, they've been coming into us, they're established with us and stuff. So sometimes, if we have the ability, why not go over there and stuff? And especially like a lot of these people seeing familiar faces at restaurants when we do these demos, or seeing a lot of new cooks. It's nice to just sort of just be like, hi, we're your friendly neighborhood, knife, sharpening and shop.
Got you.
And kind of help people out, answer questions and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it could be easy for people to be like intimidated, or like think it's going to be like this like bike mechanic kind of like interaction where like they're like kind of roll your eyes for not knowing it. But like,
I'm not down with that, bro.
No, and it shouldn't be that way. And I think it's just like so off-putting. Is like I've been to shops like that where like someone is just like so unabashedly like, I know more than you. And you're like, well, no shit. That's why I'm standing on this side of the counter and you're standing on that side.
Right.
So like, I'm going to ask dumb questions and I'm going to like not understand this. And like, it's on them. Like, if you want to grow and help these people grow, is to like, provide answers and help them and accommodate, instead of being like, oh, I just know that it's actually this. And it's just like, doesn't help anyone, And so I really think it's important to like have these opportunities with cooks and home cooks for that matter, to like have classes and like really get to show people how, sharpening is not this like impossible magical like thing where you have to like, climb Mount Fuji to gather water. And like have your stone mined from this place. And
well, the Japanese, man, I'm telling you, God damn it, bro. Everything they do is just the top of the crop, So it's like back in the day when I was like sharpening my knives, I would look at the Corinne video and I'd be like, there's no way, like this guy's been doing it for 40 years. Yeah. And something that I found too is, and tell me if I'm wrong here, I know that there's the right way to sharpen, but if you and Josh, are sharpening in the right way, it's still going to be different. Yeah. Slightly.
Totally. Correct me if I'm wrong, Japanese knives.
Yeah, just basically that craft is so important to them, and they do it in this certain way. Can you just explain like what the methodology is at Bernal Cutlery? Is it Japanese? Is it a hybrid of different methods? Is it just angles?
It's a hybrid. It's like a lot of learning and stuff.
Right.
Like I definitely think that there's a lot of roads to the same destination, and so like it's not necessarily the correct or the right and the wrong way to do it. We prefer to use switching hands, so the knife is in both hands.
Okay.
And so at all times the edge is pointed towards you instead of having a leading stroke.
Go away.
Yeah. So like I'll show on like the camera. So like when I'm sharpening, I'm like sharpening like this.
Right.
And then I switch hands to this side, compared to like sometimes people will like go like this and then they'll go like that,
exactly. What do you think that does to it? I
think that negative. It like by mirroring yourself, you get the same rhythm in both hands instead of having this awkward thing where one is like kind of like this.
Yeah.
And I also think by cutting it kind of that way into it, your angle could be kind of hard.
You're kind of rounding a little bit when you do that.
The tip becomes very hard, and there's something referred to as a bird's beak that very easily happens, where like basically, your tip is like curved like this and it starts to go in like this.
Oh, okay.
And that happens because people aren't lifting their elbow up and out. And so you have it flat, you're following the same geometry here, so you're just taking out that hump right there.
Ooh.
And so those are like the most common things I see. And then also from doing that sort of like leading cut, like a lot of the chin area of the knife kind of doesn't really make as much contact as it should, so that part kind of gets missed a little bit too.
Right.
So like in my expertise, I typically feel like I don't prefer to do that kind of style, but I also know a lot of people get really great results with it.
Right.
So that's certainly a part of it.
As far as time goes, because I I guess what I would do is like say 20 strokes is going to get me there kind of thing. But like, how do you know?
So I think counting is like a way that they teach people, but it shouldn't be like implemented always.
Right.
With counting, it depends always on the knife, not how many times you do it. So at a certain point, you're going to be either under or overworking, but thinking it's fine because you reach 20 or 50 or whatever you're counting to. What I think the most important thing to do first is to form your burr. And so the burr is like, so this is your edge right here. It's that piece of like foil that kind of, you feel it. It's like the rough part. So that is your old edge getting pushed to the front of the knife, if you kind of want to think about it that way. And so when you form that burr, that means that you have a fresh new edge hiding behind that, right? So if you don't form a burr properly, or if you work for a while and you have your burr formed except for like one spot, you don't feel that at all, that means that you don't have it formulated at that spot yet. And so you need to work more there. So I think the first most important thing when working with one of your low stones, anywhere from like 400 to 1,000, depending on the kind of bevel and et cetera, is to form the burr. And that's only going to be really on one side at a time, right? So if you have a full burr on one side and then you do a couple strokes on the other side, it should actually push all the way to the other side, and then you'll feel that.
Right.
So once you have that consistent burr and your bevels look nice and concise and good, you can move to a fine stone. Now, there's also the whole thing where people are like, I put a 14 degree or a precise 16 degree angle on this, and the answer is no, you don't.
Right.
Unless you're like having it in a jig or something like this,
unless you're fucking impossible. Mr. Robotnik, there's no way you're gonna be able to tell that.
And at the same time, if I hand you a blade and like you're like, oh, I put 16 on this, and like mine's like a 14, you're not gonna notice. You can't notice stuff like that.
Right.
So I think like getting the degree stuff is something to avoid too. What really depends is what are you using the knife for, and what is because you get a really nice petty and put like a really high steep angle on it, and it's gonna be great for doing tougher like butchery work,
right? Because
you put some shoulder behind that edge. It's tough. It's gonna dull. It's not gonna cut carrots as well as it would, but it's gonna be able to take care of the heavier stuff, Or you get a knife and you make it super thin, and just like a laser behind the sides. You put a really wide bevel on it, or you put a bias bevel where it's like asymmetrical on the edge.
Right.
Those are all going to affect it. And I think that's one of the most important things with like cooks and sharpening is realizing that like when you start to understand these and practice these skills, you could get better results with your knives. It's just like, and it's an interesting thing seeing like cooks spend so much time on like all these different other aspects and like tricks to like do different jobs better, and tools to do different things, or like spend all this time adapting and like practicing skills for certain things, but don't think about sharpening as one of those integral things.
Dull knives are fucking rampant in this industry. And I'm like, what happened? Remember when they used to send you home when you had a fucking dull knife?
And
that's crazy.
So it's like those are all important things. And then so after you formulate this burr, you go to your fine stone, and then just do the kind of same practice, kind of working through it. I always like also tell people like, going back on the whole angle thing, a lot of people check their work too much while they're sharpening. And every time you do that, your angle is like a little bit different.
Right.
And so it's almost like set it at an angle that feels right and just keep it down there for a while, work it for a while until like for a couple minutes, and then take it up and look at your angle, because if you like go a couple strokes, pick it up, a couple strokes, pick it up, you're like pitting the shutter like rounded bevel, right. And so that's one of the most important things to avoid if you're going to want to have a nice precise angle. And it's like if it's a little bit like steeper or wider but it's flat and consistent, that's going to matter way more than it's like at the angle you want but it's rounded. Because if you think about it, like a nice flat angle looks like this, right? And then when that starts to dull, it's like it still has that shoulder and that shape, but then you have this rounded angle that comes in like this, right? And then it's a little sharp at the tip, and when it dulls you just have this right, and like that's not going to have that sort of punch to go through stuff. So I think like rounding is a big part of like why a lot of cooks feel like their knives don't last as long.
Yeah.
Or, you know, every cook I know has that, you know, especially if they've been in for a while, they have that 5-year-old, you know, Tojiro or Mac knife or like Misono.
Right.
You know, everyone has that one where it's just like, they're like, man, this thing does not stay sharp anymore. And it's because it's thick and they've sharpened it for 5 years and it's chunky and it's like an axe head now. So at a certain point, there's like more aggressive work that needs to be done to knives, such as thinning, where you're actually taking the sides down of a knife.
Okay. Got you. That makes sense.
A lot of the time, like cooks are like, this thing dulls right away, or like, I don't know what's going on with it, or it just doesn't sharpen the same. It's because they're working through so much more surface area when they sharpen it. And so that's sort of like the point where, you know, you start to think like, do I want to go through and buy all these stones that are really coarse and aggressive to shave this down? Do you want us to have us do it, which can also be expensive? You know, it's like $40 to $50 to thin a knife because how much work is spent like removing all that steel and then polishing it so it doesn't look like, you know, someone took it to the sidewalk outside. And then and the time that goes into it too. It's a time, you know, it's a labor, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And then there's also the point where it's like, you know, you could pay that, buy that, or you could think about that $50 going to a new knife.
Right.
You know, you just put like a real steep angle on it and you could use it to break down lobster tails and salmon and stuff. And I usually think that's the way to go. Like, you know,
Kiwi brand, baby.
Yeah. There's definitely like a whole thing where like, I think a lot of early knives are sold to people that are like, this is going to last your lifetime.
Yeah. That's
like,
bullshit.
If you never use it.
Yeah,
absolutely. It'll last millions of lifetimes, you know, but
knives
if
are
you
like
use
tires.
It, like, yeah, man, like you got to get them rotated.
You got to work on them, bro.
Especially if you work in like a labor intensive kitchen.
Yeah.
Like,
so I usually
5 years or so.
If a cook walks in and he's got more than like 8 knives on him, I'm just like, half of those are dull.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no fucking way. Keep your 3. You only really need 3, a petty, a boner and a chef knife. You're good.
See, and that's something I've noticed recently too about like cooks that I think is really cool. It's like it's almost like this thing we're having this giant roll. I know a lot of cooks that like they have a stage and someone comes in with this like giant fucking knapsack. They're like, oh no. Like, you know, we got a gearhead.
Yeah.
Like, and then, you know, it's more common to have these cooks, they have like their chef, their petty, and their specialized knife that's like, you know, a bread or a boning or whatever that like they do. It's tight. It's got their spoons, their book, whatever they need in there. And it's easy, you know, it could throw in a backpack. Because like, you know, especially kitchens are tight. You don't want someone like unrolling like a world map on the table filled with all their knives.
Right.
You know, when you're busy and this and that. And also like, those things get gross, man. I've seen some really, really gross knife rolls.
Yeah. I saw your post knives. About a knife the other day. It was dirty.
Yeah.
Some chef brought in a dirty knife to you? What is that?
Oh, it's awful. Always wash your knives before bringing them to us. Yeah. You know, it happens way more.
That's gross. That is like,
I'd like to,
unacceptable.
Think about. Yeah. I always say, you know, it's the same as like, you know, shitting in your pants and bringing it to the tailor for them. It's like that's not our job.
Yeah, no,
I sharpen it. I don't.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
God damn. Now, when it comes to stones, I have 3. I got a 400, 1,000, and a 6,000.
Yes.
Now, I've just always used that, so that's where I go. Yep. But should there be another stone in there? How many stones should you actually have, and what grits should they be?
It really depends on what kind of work that you're doing.
Okay.
I think having a 400 is excellent. That's a really great starting point that a lot of people don't have.
But you shouldn't need to go to that every time, right?
Not necessarily, no. But also sometimes it's helpful to think about a coarser stone as being faster, you know. And the issue with things sub 100 sub 1,000 is a lot of people don't have those. And the reason is because they're afraid of sharpening away their knife too much.
Right.
You know, and that makes sense. But you could spend 15 minutes with a 400 that would take you 45 with the 1,000, and you're probably going to get a flatter, more concise bevel with that compared to, because if you spend a lot of time on one stone, like especially if you have a wide bevel knife and you're on a 1,000, you're going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like kind of, you know, bumpy and it's going to have like a little bit of a curve to it. It's not going to be nice, flat, precise. But if you spend a little bit of time with like a 400 or something coarser, it's going to take that out and give you that nice fresh head. So I'm always like in the wheelhouse of like telling people, you know, low is like a great place to kind of start and focus. Then there's also, I think the main thing people are missing in their kits is flatteners. Okay. Flatteners are massive. So if you don't have a flattener and you use your knife, you know, the stone doesn't stay the exact same thing. It wears away. That's where all that grit is coming from. It's just like, it's sediment from the metal, and it's also sediment from the stone. So when you use that, and especially if you don't use your full kind of focus and area of your knife, you're going to start digging like a little like half pipe. Yeah. And what happens with that is that if you have a really dip stone, like if you could feel it with your fingers, like it's already too big. Like that's like, okay. And if you could see it, it's like
throw it away.
Not throw it away, but like you're about to put some elbow grease in. You know, take it to the sidewalk even or something before putting it on like a 100 grit. So when you have that happen and you apply pressure to that, your pressure is dipping into the groove, but the rest of the stone near the edges is flat. So you're like kind of gouging it and getting rounded angles off of that. So that's one of the main things that is going to be detrimental. I always say it's exactly like us flattening stones. We do it all day after like a couple knives. Like our stones are always flat. That's our main thing to getting nice, precise work is flattening. It's the exact same as cooks sharpening their knives. That's our version of prepping, is flattening our stones. Right. Because if you start with something that's not flat, you're just setting yourself up for the whole rest of it. Got you. So you can get something really nice like an Atoma diamond plate, which are like $120, which are like crazy aggressive. They could be used on knives too. Those are great. We use them because we're flattening all day and sharpening all day, so it makes sense for us. But if you're not sharpening that much, it's like, you know, especially if you like only have a couple other stones and none of them are close to $100, it wouldn't make sense to buy like $100 flattener, you know? Right. So there's also like $30 versions that are like just really aggressive, like 100 grit stones, and they have like slats in them so that they cut really quickly. And those are awesome for like, you know, fixing up flattening stones. You basically just run it on top. It's sort of like the same with like lithography or stuff like that, where you're like flattening a surface so you could get a print or something. So you would use that on it, and it is going to flatten your stone. And then you'd use like something a little bit smoother, like if you have a 1000 or a Nagura, which is those little white bricks, to sort of smooth it over afterwards, right? To sort of refresh your stone and give it a nice new, you know, lift. So that is super, super important for getting good results with knives. That is often like overlooked. Okay. And then I know that like Messermeister makes stones. Yeah. Are those worth it? So I think any stone is better than no stone. Right. So the whole thing with what worth is how long it lasts. Like I know a lot of people, I got started on king stones. A lot of people get them on king stones. You get like a couple of them for like $30 each on Amazon or something like that. But the reason why they're so much cheaper is that they break down quicker. Their binder and their grit isn't as compact, doesn't hold as well. Right. So it's just like anything else, you know, you could buy really cheap like shirts or pants or underwear, and it's going to rip and deteriorate much quicker. Yeah. Or you could buy something a little nicer and maybe has a couple more goes out of it, you know? And so having those binders and stuff is really important. And if you don't have a flattener with stones like that, they're just going to dish immediately. And then you're going to start having your results not be really great because of that issue with the dip in them. Right. So, so it's just, you know, I'm sort of in like the whole wheelhouse of like buy once, cry once when it comes to like, if I like really know I'm going to use something and like it, just like do it right. Or like, I forgot who it is. Oh, it's like Adam Savage from Mythbusters. Okay. He has this whole like bit about like, when you're buying tools, like if you're getting into something, he's like, buy the cheapest version you could find of it first, right? And if you use that until it breaks, then you buy the nicest version of it. Right. And like that is like a great mentality to have when it comes to like stones and stuff like that. Because if you buy that cheapest version and it still works, like you didn't need to spend all the extra money on one, right? You know? But if you are not getting good results, or you know, you use it till it's gone, or you're having issues with the way it was working, it's a really great way to kind of, you know, learn from that at why something that is better is going to be better.
Yeah. Heard that. How about those stones that have the two sides to them?
Those are great. Yeah.
So you like, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think for people that are being minimalists or kind of want to dip their toe in the water, it's an excellent way to get into it.
Yeah.
You know, there are certainly pros and cons to them when it comes to their size and packability. The issues with them though, is that, you know, like any other stone, when it starts to get pretty close to its like half-life, it's important to glue it down to like a piece of like rot resistant wood or, you know, a plastic or something that you could soak in water, because it'll keep it from breaking, because they get fragile, especially with pressure on them.
Right.
You know, so if you put them on a piece of like ipe wood or something like that, you'll be able to use that thing until the bitter end. But if you don't, it just becomes fragile. At a certain point with pressure, it's just going to crack like a tile. You know, now with those you can't do that, because you'd be sacrificing one of the sides of the stone.
Okay.
So at a certain point, with a lot of use, they do become a little bit fragile in the middle, because you're wearing them down from both sides. Also, a lot of the glue and binder that they use in them could sometimes deteriorate a little bit and like prolong soaking. So most stones should never really live in water anyway. There's certainly ones that are more okay with that than others, but
they get a little weird slippery shit on them when you do that.
Yeah, it's kind of just like the same with you know, reaching in under an ice cube machine or something like that. You know, it's just not so cute. But yeah, so it's important for them not to be like prolonged soak. That could help break down the binder, and then that would have them crack in half or split or something like that. But besides that, I think they're like a great, you know, way. And depending on which grits you get, I think that like a lot of people are afraid to get them because they're like, oh, if I get really into this, it's going to be like this useless one. But there's still a lot of applications for having those. Like I use them at home a lot, because like if I'm just doing like little light work mostly there, and it's an easy just one stoke stone, or if I like have a friend coming over and we're like doing a little bit of sharpening together, it's an easy one for them to work with.
Okay.
But then I also have like, you know, 10 other stones that are like my whole collection of different ones. And to like answer your question about like what are you missing, I think it really depends on what you're using with them. Like I think a lot of the time people assume that like if 6,000 grit is this sharp, then 12,000 is going to be twice as sharp. But that's not the case at all.
Right.
You know, it's possible to make something too sharp, and it really depends on the type of steel that you're using and how it reacts to that. Like, you know, a lot of people, one of their first knives they're pretty familiar with Japanese is like VG10 and stuff like that, which is a great like super steel. I mean, it's been around for like 30 years, so it certainly was a super steel. There's definitely better steels. It has a pretty decent edge life and retention, but it kind of becomes a pretty pain in the ass to sharpen eventually when it starts to get thicker. And I actually find, especially a lot of us else at Bernal Cutlery, that finishing it around like 3,000 to 4,000 is like really key, because you keep this nice toothiness to it. It's going to have a nice bite to it, and it's also not going to be like too slicked out by getting finished too fine.
Right.
Most of the really high end fine stuff you'll find is mostly going to be for like either single bevel knives like Yanagi's, or straight razors.
Okay.
Those definitely need to be finished like finer to get that kind of pop when they touch, because you don't like, you know, that's always a test too when you're like sharpening, is like some people will like touch down their hair or like to their skin, and it kind of pops hairs. With like a razor, you don't want any snag, you just want it to touch hair and it just
gone,
they pop. Yeah.
Right.
So, and you need something really fine for that. But if you're cutting like, you know, tomatoes and this and that, like it's not the exact same thing as cutting hair.
And just use a bread knife.
Yeah.
Is there any way to sharpen a bread knife?
Oh, there sure is. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So bread knives, so to get started, they have what are referred to as tines, right? Which So they either have like sort of pointed like wave, like when you're drawing waves in kindergarten, like they have that kind of point in a U shape.
Or they're reptar teeth.
And then there's like the ones that are like little nibs. They are referred to as oh my gosh, it just went blank on me. So there's like serrated, and then there's like the like unpointed tines.
Right.
Or they're like curved. It's like a shallow wave.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, like those are the worst ones. A lot of
the Japanese style ones are like that.
I don't like those.
But that's because they're designed for softer breads. You know, So they're not going to have the pointed
That's your
tines.
fucking sourdough.
Yeah. Or like, if you're doing like Japanese milk bread or something
that,
and you have a really aggressive pointed one, it's just going to saw it up. You're gonna have like all those Z's in the face of it.
That's
and stuff.
a good fucking point.
Scalloped.
Never thought about that. Scalloped.
Okay. Yes, because it's like the shell.
Mm-hmm.
So scalloped bread knives are going to be for softer things. They're also really great for tomatoes because they're not going to be like, everyone's like had like that like bodega sandwich where the tomato has like these crazy like zigzags from the bread knife, like from slicing it. And scallop is a little bit smoother. So those are great for softer things. But if you're doing sourdough, crusty breads, etc., like a nice like pointed tine is gonna be great. Okay. So when you look at a bread knife, you'll notice that there's one side that like was actually brought to a machine that grinds those tines, and it's almost just like it looks like a roll of lifesavers that you just put the knife to, and they like dip into each of those little holes so they're like stacked together.
Right.
And that helps kind of put those grinds on it, right? And then there's going to be a backside that like is not ground. Sometimes there is exceptions. There's knives that are ground on both sides that are dual serrated, but typically there's only one side that has those serrations. And then so what you need to do is like you go to like a hardware store, get like a chainsaw file, or if you have one of those Mac honing rods and your serrations are big enough, you could actually just sort of flip that into each one. But what you need to do is formulate that burr by using a file or aggressive substance to scoop into each one of those tines. So like bread knives, you have to go into each one and get that. And then on the back side, it's really important to sort of push that burr back over so you could release it. So you typically, do 1,000 or like a 4,000 or something on the back, like you'll go through those stages, but you want to go almost flat. If you go as steep as you normally do on a knife, you're just going to dock all your teeth right off.
Right.
So, having it at a low, nice angle is important, but it's scary to people because then, you could scratch the backside of the knife, but that's okay because you're going to have a sharp bread knife, So, and then stropping compounds and different kinds of things like that are super helpful for that.
I think the strop is what changed my life.
Oh,
when you guys showed me that, I was like, this is like.
So, and basically a lot of people don't realize is like without a strop and like you don't necessarily have to do that, but if you're not doing any kind of like newspaper or leather belt finish after sharpening, you basically got right to the tiptoe of finishing your knife and then you're like, I'm done now. And so like stropping is a super crucial like spot that's often overlooked in sharpening.
What grit is that little green?
They could be so we have a lot of different ones. They're all going to be like different grits depending on different things. It's sort of something that we've really started nerding out on is different like compounds.
Right.
Like chromium's like the classic one. It's also called like Jeweler's Rogue, where it's just like it's a green polish. It comes in bricks for buffing wheels and stuff like that. But we have it as more of a paste that's really easy to put onto strops like butter on toast.
I have like 2 of those things.
So that one's definitely on the finer side, and then we have some that are a little bit coarser, depending on the kind of knives that you're doing. Like we kind of are in the ideology that like European stainless knives, like Wusthoffs and Henkels and stuff, those really shine finishing them no more than like 1,000, 2,000 grit. But if you have a nice coarse like strop afterwards, you're going to get a good polish on it, and it's going to keep that because. If you were to get like that Wusthoff or Henkel and bring it all the way up to 8,000 grit, it's going to split hairs and it's going to be sharp. But the moment you touch it on something like a board or something, it's going to dull right away.
Crumble
because that steel is not hard enough to hold such a fine edge. And that's an important thing to think about, and that's one of the things that makes Japanese knives better in the sense of edge retention and sharpness is that they're harder steel, but it's also why they're so much more fragile.
Right. Wow, that's crazy. Harder steel, yet more fragile.
Yes.
When you look at a Wusthoff, and
think about like a piece of glass or something. That, right? It's just like a metal is softer, but if you hit it with something hard, it's gonna ding or something like that. And then like a metal pole or something like that.
Right.
And then glass, that's gonna theoretically have a sharper like angle on it, but if you hit it the wrong way, it's gonna shatter, and so that's like kind of an outlandish example of those two different things, but at the same part, is definitely a big part of it. And then just like figuring out, what's best for you. I think a lot of times people like want Japanese knives, or like, especially like home cooks are like, oh, like I want something like this. And we always say, it's just like, it depends on what you're looking for. There's no right or wrong. Like, I have both of those knives and I use them both. It just depends on like, if I'm doing something ham-fisted and want to not think about it, or if I'm going to cook in the backyard, I'm not going to bring my nice Japanese knife down on where it could fall down or something.
Yeah.
I'll bring that
seen
knife
it before,
I bought
Chef.
from Josh like 10 years ago. It's like that great, like, stainless steel Case Vatier, and it's thick and chunky now, but like it's still great.
Still
like,
does
workhorse.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you make a chef knife into a boning knife after many years?
Yeah, it's not going to be a good one.
Okay. Because I have a chef knife that like has gotten really short. What's the best thing to do with that kind of knife? Make it.
I think at a certain point, there's nothing wrong with a knife going to live with grandma and grandpa on the farm.
Right. Heard. And taking it out back of the barn, shooting it right in the face.
Yep. Exactly. Get his gold watch.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you can certainly still have application. That's why I usually say, like, the old chef knife is great for doing that tougher, like, salmon and lobster tails and stuff.
Yeah.
But changing and removing metal to make it a new, different shape, I feel like is never really worth it. Just because, if you think about it, it's thick now. If we took another centimeter off of it, it's going to be like 2 millimeters thick at the edge. Right. And it's like, it's not even going to be a good boning knife because of how like thick and chunky it is. It'll probably work, but I think sometimes like the sentimental value of something overlooks it's like utility.
It's actual value. It's like... Yeah,
I mean that's a lot of different applications.
You could say that things. For a lot of shit, dude.
Shoes and people's cars. There's other stuff like that.
People's cars.
And I think that's just like a human quality. It's sometimes hard to let go of things.
Cool. So what do you see yourself like sort of taking all of this and creating something, or do you see yourself staying with the Bernal Cutlery family and kind of growing that?
I mean, I love it. I think there's definitely like more stuff to go, and there's like, right now we're focusing more on like video production and stuff like that. And I think that stuff is super exciting.
Yeah, for sure. That's what everybody wants to see, man.
Yeah, exactly. We did it for a little bit. We're doing some construction to like our office room where we have our little studio.
Okay.
So we're like having a little hiatus right now.
Are you just doing like sharpening classes?
No, we have sharpening classes. Those are downstairs in our sharpening room, but we have like an office place, which is helpful, like getting away from the floor and ordering and stuff. But it's also where we have like a little table and like a little, sort of like this, like a little sound studio to do it. So
how do you come up with the content?
Just like, working with the team, figuring out what we want to either sell or talk about, and working with Josh. He does a lot of the videos. I do a lot of the back end side of recording and editing and sound and stuff. And it's just fun. I think something that makes us special too is that like, we live and work in this beautiful, Bay Area and city, but also there's a whole world out there of people that like, want to learn, but they don't live around here. And like, we're far from the days of like, you being able to like have a knife like be transported out from your computer and float in front of you so you could see the size and look of it. And in the meantime, like doing videos and having a person hold it and talk about it is super helpful. And like while we're not doing YouTube stuff right now and we're planning to do it soon, we've been doing a lot of like more reels on Instagram and stuff like that. And I think it's important, like seeing someone hold it and what it looks like, and it gives you kind of more of an example than just like a couple pictures of it like on its side on the board, and that stuff is super helpful and engaging, and getting people that like they're like, I know nothing about this stuff, and reaching out to us is really cool. We do like video consulting too, so anyone could hit us up.
Like have a Zoom meeting with you?
Yeah.
Oh, dope.
Yeah, it's like $25.
Yeah.
And like that 25 goes towards your purchase if you decide to purchase something. Otherwise, it's just like a cool handy
not
fee
bad,
for
bro. That's cool
for like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really awesome way to just talk to one of our super passionate coworkers about something, kind of figuring out what's good for you. And it's funny because it's like, to me, it's just like I've been there for so long and I know so much about it. I forget how like intimidating it could be shopping for a knife, or like not knowing where to go or what's right. So like really being able to, go in the shop or meet with us is super helpful. And I think that's one of the things that really makes us so special is like having the opportunity to go in there and like help people find something and have it be like industry or home cooks, you know. And like we've definitely noticed like a huge jump in home cooks through the pandemic, because I think what happened early on is people, you know, especially if you worked in like tech or offices where like, you know, you have a lot of food provided for you and, you know, you stay a little bit late, they bring dinner for you, etc. And you go home and then you're working from home and it's like, you know, there's no little snack bar or fridge filled with, you know, healthy colas and stuff like that. And so a lot of people started realizing how expensive it is ordering food all the time and DoorDash and all that. And so we started to have more people who are like, I've been getting into cooking, you know? And so now you have people who are like, oh, I'm getting into cooking and I do it like all the time. So I want to get good tools and stuff. But then you're kind of starting at ground zero, because like with cooks, they come in and they're like, I'm looking for a slicer. This is the kind of stuff I'm like cutting, and this is what I'm doing. This is the steels I prefer. I'm familiar with carbon steel. And then it's like, you're like, boom, boom, boom. These are the options I think would be best for you. And then they pick them up and they're like, yeah, this is the one. This is like, and they just visualize the whole day, you know? And then you have more home cooks coming in and they're like, I'm looking for my first knife. And you're like, awesome. Like, you know, do you have any idea? And they're like, I don't know what a knife is, you know? And there's like nothing wrong with that, because everyone has to start somewhere. But it's like definitely like you're like, okay, let's build this whole thing. Let's go in. Let's go into it. So it takes a little bit more time, but you can see that they're stoked, you know? And I think it's important to be very welcoming to people like that, because you never know where someone's going to end up from getting into cooking. You know, we all like, sure, everyone on the story has a story, or everyone on the show has like a story about like, you know, I wasn't really into cooking until this one thing. Or like I kind of liked it and then something happened and like, you know, so
turning points.
I think it's cool, and trying to be there for people like that is really awesome.
Fuck yeah. Well, Tim, I think we fucking leave it there, bro.
Perfect.
Hell yeah, bro. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure, man. Absolutely. Yeah.
Dope. And where can we find, where can the people go to Bernal Cutlery? Let's say the address one more time.
766 Valencia on Valencia Street between 18th and 19th.
Dope. Open every day?
Open every day.
7 days a week,
7 days a week.
Good for you guys.
12 to 6. Sharpening's open all those days too.
Gotcha.
Instagram, YouTube, etc. All Bernal Cutlery. And yeah, stop on by, check it out.
Fuck yeah.
Know a lot of you already, and yeah.
Sucio Talk.
It's a pleasure, man.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.